The ayes to the right were 111, the noes to the left 364. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock.
The Conservatives have desperately been trying to push for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal, and they have failed in that bid. The government won a vote by 364 votes to 111 in an overwhelmingly common show of strength. The vote happened after Prime Minister questions earlier, where KEMI Badenoch used all 6 questions to put pressure on the Prime Minister to hold a probe. Now, there have been several local level probes, and there was the J inquiry that concluded in 2022 with its inquiries. But KEMI Badenoch wanted all those inquiries brought together under one national inquiry to join the dots between them. But so far, despite putting much pressure on the Prime Minister in recent days, she has failed in that bid.
The new year has started with a focus on the decades-long rape gang scandal. Across the country, thousands of girls were tortured and sexually abused at the hands of men who treated them as things to be used and disposed of, destroying many lives forever. The Prime Minister has mentioned previous inquiries. He is right, there has been an inquiry into child sexual abuse, but it wasn't about the rape gang scandal. In its 468 pages, it mentioned Rotherham just once. Is the Prime Minister confident that we know the full extent of rape gang activity?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of a further inquiry, there have been a number of inquiries, some of them localised, including the Mayor of Manchester's inquiry recently, and of course a national inquiry Professor Jay carried out, took 7 years, had 20 recommendations, none of which actually were implemented by the party opposite when they were in government. Now, this is a really serious issue. We must focus, obviously, on the victims and survivors. There's no fixed view on the victims and survivors about a further national inquiry. There are mixed views. But there is a view, and I share this view, that what is needed now is action on what we already know. We already know, myself from personal knowledge when I was Chief Prosecutor, that warped ideas, myths and stereotypes about victims were at the heart of this. We've known that for a decade. The J report called for mandatory reporting. I called for it 11 years ago. What we need now is action. What can't be tolerated is the idea that this afternoon members opposite will vote down a bill which protects children, include Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me just. One of the provisions in the bill is to protect children vulnerable today who are out of school to prevent abusers ever taking those children out of school. I implore members opposite to defy the misleading leadership of the Leader of the Opposition and vote for a really important bill.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has effectively told us that he's not able to do 2 things at the same time. This issue of a delay is a weak excuse, and I would say to him that by refusing this inquiry, he is enabling those people who wish to smear all British Muslims based on the actions of a small minority. He is talking about distraction tactics. Let us have the truth. The Prime Minister cannot tell the House the full scale of the scandal. He doesn't want questions asked of Labour politicians who may be complicit. He won't listen to the victims. He won't listen to the victims who are calling for a national inquiry. He is making this all about a bill this afternoon. Later today, he will tell Labour MPs, including in Telford, Rochdale, Bristol, Derby, Aylesbury, Oldham, Bradford, Peterborough, Coventry, Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Ramsgate, to tell all of these people to vote against a national inquiry into the gangs which have systematically gang-raped children in their constituencies. This is one of the worst scandals in British history, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry? This is a very
very important issue that does matter to the country. It matters to all our constituents. I want to make sure they can hear what's being said by the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the worst scandals in recent British history. But how are they going to explain to their constituents that obeying his whip is more important than doing the right thing?
She's right to say it's one of the worst scandals. It's terrible. That's why I acted on it. If her recently acquired view that it's a scandal, having spent a lot of time on social media over Christmas, not once in 8 years did she stand here and say what she's just said. Not once in 8 years. They didn't act on the recommendations. They want a national inquiry. We had a national inquiry, the J inquiry, the J report. 20 recommendations, not a single one implemented. Not a single one implemented. And she said you can do two things at once. You can't kill the bill this afternoon, wreck that bill, and protect children. There was Mr. Speaker, there was a dreadful case of Sarah Sharif that everybody will remember. This was the girl taken out of school and abused by an abuser. The bill this afternoon fixes that gap. And I know, I'm looking across, I know there are honourable members on the benches opposite who know very well that what's in this bill is necessary, that it's the right thing to do, and that would want to vote for this bill. I urge them to think twice about following this short-sighted, misguided, bandwagon-jumping approach of the non-leadership of the Leader of the Opposition. I urge them to.
That Prime Minister's questions earlier, she put the pressure on Sir Keir Starmer to change his mind, but ultimately it failed. She used remarks like, it's time to show that you are a leader, but not a lawyer, to try and change his mind. But then today, we've had mixed messages from the government. In the morning, Sir Keir Starmer was meeting some victims of abuse. And then after that, despite ruling the inquiries out for the last few days, Downing Street told journalists that the government was open-minded to such an inquiry. So there are slight mixed messages this evening. So we'll just have to see how that develops in the coming days. Now, one of the reasons why Sir Keir Starmer didn't want to have an inquiry, the last inquiry took 7 years. Now, one thing he doesn't want to do is see the next inquiry, if there was one, conclude in 2031. So he's been very, very keen to put the brakes on any idea of an inquiry, despite those mixed messages from Downing Street earlier. This row has exploded over the last few days because Elon Musk has got involved. He has praised KEMI Badenoch for pushing the case for an inquiry and has been absolutely vicious in his attacks on Sir Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips to make sure they hold an inquiry. Now, this throws another dimension into the problematic thinking of Sir Keir Starmer, because at every turn, he knows how closely aligned Elon Musk is, the big billionaire Tesla boss and the boss of the X platform, how closely aligned he is to Donald Trump. So he has to consider whether he wants to make a personal attack on Musk when he makes these calls for the inquiry, because he knows of the knock-on effects that will have on Donald Trump. And just around the corner, on January the 20th, Donald Trump will be entering the White House. So he has that to think about at every single turn.